Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he worked on the heavy cargo loader outside Outpost Harmony. The machine had broken down again, and someone needed to fix it before the next supply run. Jake was the strongest Marine on the base, so he always got stuck with these jobs. The planet Kepler was hot today, with 2 suns beating down on the metal equipment. Jake had removed his shirt hours ago, and his muscles glistened with sweat as he lifted another piece of machinery. The cargo loader weighed about 300 pounds, but Jake carried it like it was a bag of groceries. Movement caught his eye near the tree line. A group of tall, graceful figures approached the outpost. They moved like dancers with long, flowing hair that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. These were the Veltar, the alien species that humans had recently made contact with. Jake had seen them before during diplomatic meetings, but never up close. They looked almost like elves from old Earth stories, with pointed ears and elegant features. Their skin had a slight blue tint, and their eyes were larger than human eyes. The group walking toward him wore what looked like armor made from some kind of crystal material. The leader of the group was a female with silver hair that reached her waist. She carried a weapon that looked like a sword, but it glowed within her light. Her armor fit her perfectly and showed off her athletic build. Jake could tell she was a warrior just by the way she moved. The group stopped about 20 feet away from Jake and watched him work. The female leader stepped forward and spoke in accented English that sounded like Muzakar. "You strong human warrior." Jake looked up from his work and noticed all 6 aliens staring at him with wide eyes. He set down the piece of equipment he was holding and straightened up. "I guess so." Compared to what? The female tilted her head like she did not understand his question. She pointed at the cargo loader that Jake had been "You lift the heavy metal thing." Jake looked at the cargo loader and shrugged. It was not even close to his maximum weight. He had lifted much heavier things during his military training back on Earth. He could deadlift over 400 pounds and bench press 300. The cargo loader was nothing special. "Sure, no problem." Jake walked over to the cargo loader and squatted down next to it. He grabbed the frame with both hands and stood up, lifting the entire machine over his head. The aliens made sounds of amazement as Jake held the loader above his head for a few seconds before setting it down gently. The female leader stumbled backward, and her mouth fell open. The other aliens started talking rapidly in their own language, which sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Jake could not understand what they were saying, but they seemed very excited. The female warrior suddenly dropped to her knees and pressed her forehead to the ground. The other aliens did the same thing. Jake had no idea what was happening. "Hey, are you okay? Did I do something wrong?" The female looked up at him with tears in her large eyes. She spoke in a voice full of wonder. "You are battle deity. You lift what 6 of our strongest warriors cannot move together. You are sent by the gods to help us." Jake felt confused and worried. He had just lifted a piece of equipment that any human Marine could handle. It was basic strength training stuff, nothing special about it at all. "Look, I think there might be some confusion. Here I am, just a regular human. This is normal for us. We are built differently than you guys." But this only made the aliens more excited. The female warrior stood up and spoke louder. "You say this is normal for your kind? This proves you are divine beings. Your whole species must be battle deities, sent to guide us." More aliens started coming out of the forest. They must have called for others somehow. Jake could see at least 20 more Veltar approaching, and they all looked amazed and scared. At the same time, the female warrior, who seemed to be their leader, walked closer to Jake. She was beautiful in an otherworldly way, with features that were almost too perfect. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, and something else that made Jake uncomfortable. "I am Zarathal, daughter of the war chief. I have trained my whole life to be strong, but you make me look like a child. My sword weighs 50 pounds and I can barely lift it with 2 hands. You lifted 300 pounds like it was nothing." Jake tried to think of something to say that would calm the situation down. He did not want to be worshipped by aliens. He just wanted to fix the cargo loader and get back to his normal duty. "Escherithal, I think you should know that humans come in different strengths too. I am stronger than average, but there are humans who could lift much more than me. We have people who can lift over 1,000 pounds. This was definitely the wrong thing to say. All the aliens started making excited noises again, and some of them fell to their knees. Zarathul looked like she might faint. 1,000 pounds, she whispered. Our strongest warrior can lift 150 pounds at most. You speak of gods among gods. Jake realized he had made the situation much worse. The aliens were now convinced that humans were divine beings, and nothing he said seemed to change their minds. In fact, every time he tried to explain normal human abilities, they became more amazed. Commander Brooks was going to be very unhappy about this. Jake could already imagine the diplomatic incident reports and the angry meetings with alien leaders. He had probably just started an interspecies religious crisis by lifting a cargo loader. Zarathul stepped even closer to Jake and bowed. Deeply great battle deity, I pledge myself to your service. I will guard you and learn from your divine wisdom. Please, accept this humble warrior as your devoted follower. Jake looked around at all the aliens who were now bowing and chanting something in their musical language. He had definitely created a problem that was much bigger than a broken cargo loader. Word spread through the Veltar settlement faster than Jake thought possible. By the time he returned to the outpost, dozens of aliens had gathered outside the main building. They brought flowers and crystals and strange glowing objects as offerings. Commander Lisa Brooks met Jake at the entrance with an expression that could melt steel. Martinez, what did you do out there? My communication officer says half the alien population is calling you a god. Jake tried to explain what happened, but it sounded ridiculous even to him. He had lifted some equipment, and now an entire alien species wanted to worship him. Brooks listened with growing disbelief as Jake described the encounter with Zarathelder. Amy Carter arrived while Jake was still explaining. She was the outpost's xenobiologist and cultural expert. Her face was flushed with excitement as she joined the conversation. This is incredible, Jake. You have accidentally triggered a religious awakening in their society. I have been studying their culture for months, and strength is their most valued trait. They worship warrior deities who protect the weak. But I am not a deity, Jake protested. I am just a Marine who works out regularly. That does not matter to them, Carter replied. Their strongest warriors can barely lift what you consider lightweight. To them, you have demonstrated impossible power. Therefore you must be divine. Commander Brooks rubbed her temples like she was getting a headache. The diplomatic implications of this situation were enormous. Earth had just established contact with the Veltar, and now their newest allies thought humans were gods. We need to manage this carefully, Brooks said. If we deny his divine status, we might offend them, but if we encourage it, we could be accused of manipulating their religion for political gain. Through the window, Jake could see more Veltar arriving. They were setting up what looked like a shrine made of crystalline structures that glowed with soft light. Several aliens were working together to carry stones and arrange them in patterns. Zarathul seemed to be directing the construction. High Priestess Calandra wishes to meet with the battle deity, announced a Veltar messenger who had entered the outpost. The High Priestess was the most important religious leader among the aliens, and her word carried enormous weight. Carter looked excited at the opportunity to meet such an important figure, but Brooks seemed worried about the diplomatic consequences. Jake just wanted the whole thing to go away, but he knew that was not going to happen. The High Priestess arrived an hour later, with a procession of other religious officials. She was ancient by Veltar standards, with white hair and skin that seemed to glow from within. Her robes were made of material that shifted colors as she moved. Calandra approached Jake slowly and studied him with eyes that seemed much older than her face. She spoke in perfect English, with barely any accents. Show me your strength, battle deity. I must witness the power that has stirred our people. Jake looked at Commander Brooks, who nodded reluctantly. There was no way to avoid this demonstration without causing offense. Jake walked to the cargo bay where several containers were stacked. Each container weighed about 200 pounds and was used for storing supplies. Jake picked up one container and held it easily. Then he picked up a second container with his other hand. The Veltar watching made soft gasping sounds as Jake held both containers without any visible effort. The High Priestess nodded slowly and spoke to her followers in their own language. Their responses sounded like they were confirming something important. When she turned back to Jake, her expression was one of deep respect. "You are indeed blessed with divine power," she said. "Your strength exceeds even our legends of the ancient warrior gods. I proclaim you worthy of our devotions." Jake set down the containers and tried once more to explain that humans were not divine beings. He described Earth's gravity and how it was stronger than this planet, which made humans naturally stronger here. He explained about human evolution and muscle development, but every explanation only made the aliens more convinced of his divine nature. Dr. Carter had warned him this might happen. When people believe something strongly enough, contradictory evidence often reinforces their beliefs. Instead of changing them, Rotho had appointed herself as Jake's personal guardian and rarely left his side. She was fascinated by everything about human culture and asked endless questions about Earth and human society. Jake found himself enjoying her company despite the awkward circumstances. She was intelligent and curious, with a warrior's discipline but also a gentle side that she showed when they were alone. Her dedication to protecting him was touching, even though Jake could probably protect himself better than she could. The shrine outside grew larger each day more. Veltar came to see the battle deity and leave offerings. Jake tried to discourage the worship, but nothing worked. When he gave the offerings to charity, the aliens praised his generosity. When he refused to accept them, they praised his humility. Commander Brooks held daily meetings to discuss the situation. Earth Command wanted regular reports about the developing relationship with the Veltar. The diplomatic team was divided about how to handle Jake's new status. Some officials thought they should use Jake's influence to strengthen the alliance between humans and Veltar. Others worried about the ethical implications of allowing aliens to worship a human being. Carter suggested they focus on education and cultural exchange. Dr. Carter spent most of her time studying Veltar religious texts and comparing them to human accounts of Jake's demonstrations. She discovered that their creation myths spoke of warrior gods who would come from the stars to protect them during times of great danger. This prophecy aspect made the situation even more complicated. The Veltar believed Jake's arrival fulfilled ancient predictions about divine intervention. Carter wondered if the timing was just coincidence or if there was something else happening. Jake began teaching some basic self-defense techniques to Veltar warriors who requested training. They adapted quickly to human fighting styles despite their different physiology. Their natural agility and grace made them excellent students. Was his best student. She learned faster than the others, and her existing combat skills translated well to human martial arts. Jake enjoyed working with her and found himself looking forward to their training sessions. The formal ceremony to recognize Jake as a battle deity was scheduled for the following week. Religious officials from across the planet were traveling to attend. Commander Brooks was still trying to figure out how to handle the diplomatic aspects. Jake realized his life had changed completely in just a few days. He was no longer just a marine fixing equipment. He had become a bridge between two species, whether he wanted to or not. The responsibility felt overwhelming but also strangely important as he watched Zarathal practicing the techniques he had taught her. Jake wondered what would happen next. The ceremony would make his status official in Veltar society. There would be no going back after that. War Chief Morden arrived 3 days before the ceremony with 50 of his finest warriors. His reputation as the strongest Veltar alive preceded him, and Jake could see why. The war chief stood 7 feet tall, with muscles that looked carved from stone. His armor was black crystal that seemed to absorb light. Morden challenged Jake's divine status immediately. He claimed that no true god would hide behind alien diplomats and refused to acknowledge Jake's power without proof. The war chief demanded a trial of strength. According to ancient Veltar traditions, Commander Brooks tried to discourage the trial, but High Priestess Calandra explained that refusing would be seen as cowardice. Jake would lose all credibility with the Velt people. The ceremony could not proceed without settling. Morden's challenge. The trial would consist of 3 tests: lifting the sacred stones, combat demonstration, and endurance challenge. Each test was designed to push Veltar warriors to their absolute limits. Jake had no idea what to expect, but Zarathal assured him the tests were fair. Dr. Carter studied the historical records of previous trials and discovered that only 12 warriors had ever passed all 3 tests in Veltar history. Those warriors became legends among their people, and were remembered for thousands of years. Jake spent the days before the trial learning about Veltar combat techniques from Zarathal. She taught him their sword forms, and showed him how they used their natural agility in battle. Jake was impressed by their grace and skill, even though they lacked human strength. Sacred stones were ancient monuments that had been used for trials since the beginning of Veltar civilization. Each stone weighed more than the last, and the final stone had never been lifted by any warrior. The stones were carved with symbols that told the story of their warrior godson. The day of the trial, hundreds of Veltar gathered in the ceremonial arena. The arena was carved into a hillside with terraced seating that allowed everyone to see the tests. Jake felt nervous as he walked onto the arena floor, but Zarathal stayed close to encourage him. War Chief Morden spoke to the crowd in their musical language. Before switching to English for Jake's benefit, he explained that the trial would prove whether Jake was truly divine or just an unusually strong alien. The crowd listened in respectful silence. The first test was lifting the sacred stones. There were 7 stones arranged in order of increasing weight. The smallest stone weighed 100 pounds, and the largest weighed 600 pounds, according to Dr. Carter's measurements. Jake approached the first stone and lifted it easily. The crowd murmured appreciatively as he moved to the second stone, which was also no challenge. The third and fourth stones required more effort, but Jake managed them without too much difficulty. By the 5th stone, Jake was starting to feel the weight, but he completed the lift successfully. The 6th stone was genuinely heavy, and Jake had to focus on proper form to avoid injury. The crowd was completely silent as he prepared for the final stone. The 7th sacred stone had never been lifted in recorded history. Jake studied it carefully and realized it would be close to his maximum lifting capacity. He took a deep breath and grabbed the stone with both hands. Using his legs and core strength, Jake slowly lifted the massive stone over his head. Arena erupted in amazement as Jake held the stone aloft. Several Veltar fainted from shock, and even War Chief Morden's mouth fell open. Jake held the stone for the required 10 seconds before setting it down carefully. The second test was combat demonstration. Jake would face 3 Veltar warriors in non-lethal combat using traditional weapons. The warriors were volunteers from Morden's elite guard, and they were skilled fighters with years of experience, as Zarathal had taught Jake to use a Veltar training sword, which was lighter than human weapons, but required different techniques. The first warrior attacked with lightning speed, but Jake's superior strength allowed him to block and counter effectively. The second warrior tried to use teamwork with the third fighter, but Jake adapted quickly to fighting multiple opponents. His military training served him well as he managed distance and positioning. The crowd cheered as Jake defeated all 3 warriors without seriously injuring them. War Chief Morden looked impressed despite himself. The combat demonstration had shown that Jake could fight with skill as well as strength. This combination was highly valued in Veltar culture, where warriors needed both attributes to succeed. The final test was endurance. Jake had to carry a heavy pack while running a course through difficult terrain. The pack weighed 200 pounds, and the course included obstacles, climbing and swimming. The current record was held by Morden himself. Jake started the course at a steady pace, knowing that endurance was about pacing rather than speed. The pack felt heavy, but manageable, and Jake's military fitness training had prepared him for exactly this type of challenge. The course took him through forests, over hills, and across streams. The Veltar spectators followed the action on viewing screens set up around the arena. Jake maintained his pace, even as fatigue set in during the final kilometer. When Jake crossed the finish Liney had beaten the previous record by nearly 10 minutes. The crowd went wild with celebration, and even the skeptical warriors were cheering. Jake had not only passed all 3 trials, but had done so with impressive margins where Chief Morden approached Jake with newfound respect. He bowed deeply and spoke in formal tones that carried across the air, and I acknowledge your divine nature, battle deity. Your strength surpasses our greatest legends, and your skill honors our warrior traditions. I pledge my warriors to your service. But something unexpected happened during the celebration. Jake noticed that some Veltar warriors looked discouraged rather than excited. He realized they felt diminished by his performance rather than inspired. Jake did not want to make them feel weak or inadequate. Jake called for silence and addressed the crowd. He spoke about how different species had different strengths, and how the Veltar had abilities that humans lacked. He praised their agility, magic, powers, and cultural achievements. Then, Jake did something that surprised everyone. He asked Zarathol to demonstrate her sword work for the crowd. She performed a complex routine that combined combat moves with artistic expression. Her grace and speed were beautiful to watch. Jake explained that humans could never move with such elegance or master the magical abilities that Veltar possessed. He suggested that true strength came from combining different talents rather than competing with them. Crowd responded positively to this message, and the discouraged warriors looked more hopeful. Jake had learned an important lesson about leadership. It was not enough to be strong, you also had to lift others up and help them find their own value. Looked at Jake with new admiration. She had seen him demonstrate physical power before, but now she understood that he also possessed wisdom and compassion. These qualities were highly valued among her people. The trial had been a success, but it had also taught Jake about the responsibility that came with his status. The Veltar people were looking to him for guidance and leadership, not just displays of strength. As the celebration continued into the evening, Jake realized that his relationship with the Veltar had evolved beyond simple worship. They now saw him as a leader and protector, which carried much greater obligations. The attack came without warning. 3 weeks after Jake's trial, emergency alarms blared across Outpost Harmony as hostile ships appeared on the sensor screens. Commander Brooks rushed to the command center, where Dr. Carter was analyzing the incoming signals. The ships belonged to the Krexmar, a warrior species that had been expanding aggressively across this sector of space. They had already conquered 6 Veltar worlds, and showed no interest in diplomatic solutions. The Krexmar only respected strength and took what they wanted by force. Jake was training with Zarathol when the alarms sounded. They rushed to the command center, where tactical displays showed dozens of enemy ships approaching the planet. The Krexmar fleet was massive and heavily armed compared to the small human and Veltar forces. Chief Morden arrived with his warriors and immediately began coordinating with Commander Brooks. The Veltar had been fighting the Krexmar for years, but always lost due to inferior firepower. Their magic and agility meant nothing against advanced weapons and armor. The Krexmar sent a message demanding immediate surrender. They wanted the planet's resources and strategic location, but cared nothing for the lives of its inhabitants. Commander Brooks refused their demands and began preparing defensive positions. Jake realized this was exactly the kind of situation where his leadership would be tested. The Veltar were looking to him for guidance, and the humans needed every advantage they could get. Jake had never commanded in real combat, but his training had prepared him for this moment. The first phase of the battle took place in space, where human and Veltar ships worked together against the Krexmar fleet. The Veltar ships were fast and maneuverable, while human vessels had superior weapons and shields. The combined fleet performed better than either species could manage. Alanje coordinated the ground defenses while monitoring the space battle through communication. Link Zarathol served as his liaison with the Veltar forces and helped translate tactical concepts between the two species. The Krexmar were reptilian creatures with thick scales and powerful builds. They stood 8 feet tall, on average, and their natural armor could stop small arms fire. Their weapons used energy beams that could cut through most materials with ease. When The first wave of Krexmar dropships landed. Jake led a mixed force of humans and Veltar to intercept them. The battle plan relied on human firepower supported by Veltar mobility and magical abilities. It was the first time the two species had fought together as equals. Jake's unit engaged the enemy near the main settlement where civilian Veltar had taken shelter. The Krexmar attacked in organized formations, using their superior numbers and heavy weapons to overwhelm defensive positions, but Jake had anticipated this strategy and positioned his forces to exploit Krexmar weaknesses. The enemy relied too heavily on brute force and did not adapt well to changing tactics. Jake used hit-and-run attacks to disrupt their formations. Zarathel led a team of Veltar warriors who used their magical abilities to create illusions and confusion among the enemy ranks, while the Krexmar struggled to distinguish real targets from false ones. Human snipers picked them off from concealed positions. The battle raged for hours, as both sides took casualties. Jake moved constantly between different defensive positions, encouraging his troops and adjusting tactics based on enemy movements. His presence inspired both human and Veltar fighters to perform beyond their normal limits during the heaviest fighting. Jake found himself facing a Krexmar commander, who challenged him to single combat. The alien warrior was massive, even by Krexmar standards, and carried weapons that could level buildings. Jake accepted the challenge, knowing that defeating their commander would demoralize the enemy troops. The Krexmar leader was incredibly strong, and his natural armor protected him from most attacks, but Jake's human endurance and tactical thinking gave him advantages. The fight was brutal and lasted several minutes before Jake managed to find a weakness in the commander's armor. A well-placed strike brought down the massive alien and sent shockwaves through the Krexmar forces. Their commander defeated the Krexmar, began to retreat toward their landing zones, but Jake was not content to simply drive them off. He wanted to send a message that would discourage future attacks on Veltar worlds. Jake rallied his combined forces for a final assault on the Krexmar dropships. The attack was coordinated perfectly with human heavy weapons, providing covering fire while Veltar warriors used their speed to infiltrate enemy positions. Athel fought beside Jake throughout the final assault, and her skill with traditional weapons complemented his modern military training. They worked together like they had been partners for years, anticipating each other's moves and covering weaknesses. The Krexmar were completely routed, with many of their ships destroyed and their ground forces scattered. The few survivors fled back to space, carrying news of their defeat. The victory was total and decisive beyond what anyone had expected. In the aftermath of the battle, Jake surveyed the mixed casualties among his forces. Both humans and Veltar had fought bravely, but the cost had been significant. Several good soldiers from both species would not be going home. High Priestess Calandra arrived to tend to the wounded, using Veltar healing magic that accelerated recovery. Her presence reminded Jake that this victory meant more than just military success. It represented a new level of cooperation between their people's commander. Brooks commended Jake's leadership during the battle and recommended him for promotion. Earth Command was impressed by the successful defense and the effective cooperation with alien allies. The political implications were enormous. War Chief Morden offered Jake a permanent position as joint commander of human and Veltar forces. The proposal would require approval from both governments, but had strong support from military leaders on both sides. Jake looked at Zarathol as he considered the offer. She had proven herself as both a warrior and a leader during the battle. Her tactical suggestions had been crucial to their success, and her courage had inspired everyone who fought beside her. The relationship between Jake and Zarathol had evolved during the crisis from protector and follower to true partners. They complemented each other's strengths and covered each other's weaknesses both in combat and in leadership. Dr. Carter was already documenting the battle as a landmark example of interspecies cooperation. Her research would help other human colonies work more effectively with alien allies. The scientific and cultural implications were as important as the military ones, as Jake stood among the ruins of the battlefield. He realized that everything had changed. The Veltar no longer saw him as just a divine figure to be worshipped. They now respected him as a leader and partner, who had proven himself in the ultimate test. 6 months after the Krexmar defeat formal alliance, negotiations concluded with unprecedented success. Representatives from Earth and the Veltar homeworld signed treaties that established joint military commands, trade agreements, and cultural exchange programs. Jake stood in the ceremonial hall, wearing a uniform that combined human military insignia with Veltar decorative elements. His new rank of Joint Operations Commander made him the highest-ranking human in the Alliance structure. Beside him, Zarathel wore similar insignia marking her promotion to Strategic Liaison High Priestess. Calandra performed the final ceremony that officially recognized Jake's new status. The religious aspects had evolved significantly from simple worship to something more complex. Jake was now called the Bridge Deity, representing unity between species rather than just raw power. The ceremony was broadcast across both human and Veltar territories, showing billions of people the moment when two species became true allies. Dr. Carter had spent months preparing cultural briefings to help both sides understand the significance. Commander Brooks had been promoted to Admiral and given command of the expanded Joint Fleet. Her experience managing the crisis at Outpost Harmony made her the logical choice for overseeing military cooperation. Earth Command recognized her diplomatic skills, as well as her tactical abilities. The Alliance had already proven its value beyond the original defensive cooperation. 3 more Veltar worlds had been liberated from Krexmar occupation, using combined human and Veltar forces. The victories demonstrated that unity made both species stronger. Jake's relationship with Zarathal had become official during the negotiations. Their partnership represented the Alliance in personal terms, showing that cooperation between species could extend to the most intimate levels. Their wedding had been attended by leaders from both worlds. The cultural exchange programs were producing remarkable results. Human engineers were learning to incorporate Veltar magical principles into their designs, while Veltar scientists studied human industrial techniques. The combination was creating revolutionary new technologies. Carter published her comprehensive study of human Veltar cooperation, which became required reading at diplomatic academies. Her work showed how different species could overcome initial misunderstandings to build lasting partnerships. The research influenced contact protocols throughout human space. Jake found his new responsibilities both challenging and rewarding. He spent half his time on military planning and the other half on cultural liaison work. The job required constant travel between human and Veltar territories, but Zarathel accompanied him on most missions. Training programs had been established on 12 worlds, where human and Veltar personnel learned to work together effectively. Jake personally oversaw the advanced combat courses where elite soldiers from both species pushed each other to new levels of performance. The success of the Alliance attracted attention from other species in the region. Several aliens civilizations requested meetings to explore similar partnerships. The galaxy was taking notice of what humans and Veltar had accomplished together. Zarathal had become a celebrity among her people as the first Veltar to marry outside their species. Her example encouraged other cultural exchanges and helped break down remaining barriers between the allied peoples. Her influence extended far beyond military matters. The Krexmar had largely withdrawn from the region after suffering several major defeats. They still posed a threat, but were no longer expanding. Aggressively, intelligence reports suggested they were dealing with internal conflicts caused by their military failures. Jake's original unit from Outpost Harmony had been expanded into a full regiment, specializing in joint operations. Many of the Marines who served with him during the first crisis now held leadership positions in the Alliance military structure. New outposts were being constructed throughout the border region, each one designed as a partnership between human technology and Veltar aesthetic principles. The stations served as symbols of cooperation, as well as defensive Installation's economic cooperation was flourishing as trade routes opened between human and Veltar territories. The different industrial capabilities of each species created natural complementary markets. Raw materials flowed in both directions, along with finished goods and services. Jake often reflected on how much had changed since that day when he lifted a cargo loader outside Outpost Harmony. A simple demonstration of human strength had triggered events that reshaped to civilizations. The consequences continued to ripple outward. The religious aspects of Jake's status had evolved into something more practical while maintaining spiritual significance. Veltar prayers now included requests for wisdom and cooperation, rather than just strength in battle. The theological implications kept scholars busy for years. Research teams were studying the biological and cultural factors that made human-Veltar cooperation so effective. The goal was to create frameworks that other species could use when establishing their own alliances. The work had implications far beyond the current partnership. Jake's military innovations had been adopted throughout human space. Combined arms tactics that incorporated alien abilities were becoming standard doctrine at military academies. His tactical manuals were translated into dozens of languages. HFY's contributions to Alliance culture were equally important. Her integration of human and Veltar leadership styles created new approaches to organizational management. The techniques were being studied by corporate leaders, as well as military commanders. The success story was not without challenges. Cultural misunderstandings still occurred regularly and required constant attention from liaison officers. Some individuals on both sides remained suspicious of the alliance, despite its obvious benefits, but the overall trajectory was clearly positive. Public opinion polls showed strong support for the alliance among both human and Veltar populations. Young people especially embraced the opportunities for cultural exchange and joint services. Jake stood on the observation deck of the newest Joint Command Station. He could see ships from both species working together in perfect coordination. The sight still amazed him after all these months of partnerships. Orotho joined him at the viewport and took his hand. Their relationship had become a symbol of everything the alliance represented: trust, respect, mutual support, and the courage to embrace something entirely new. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities that neither species could have achieved alone. Jake had learned that true strength came not from individual power, but from the willingness to build something greater than yourself. Looking back at his journey from Marine mechanic to Alliance commander, Jake realized that the most important moment had not been lifting that cargo loader. It had been the decision to treat Zarathal and her people as equals, worthy of respect and partnerships. Alliance would face new challenges in the years ahead, but Jake was confident they would meet them together. The foundation built through mutual respect and shared sacrifice would support whatever came next in their remarkable partnership.